In the vast expanse of the Western Pacific, just south of Japan, lies a chain of 15 volcanic islands. This is the Marianas Archipelago, a place of breathtaking beauty and the ancestral homeland of a people whose story is etched into the very stone of the land and carried on the winds that cross the world's largest ocean. This is the land of the Chamorro or Chamorro people. Their story is not merely one of survival, but of mastery. It is the story of a people who, for millennia, thrived in this isolated paradise, developing a culture as complex and resilient as the ocean that surrounds them. They read the currents of the sea and the movements of the stars like a book, navigating across thousands of miles of open water in one of the greatest migratory feats in human history. These stones, known as latte, are their silent witnesses. They are the foundations of the houses of their ancestors, the pillars of a society that flourished long before the first European sails appeared on the horizon. They stand as a testament to a people whose very name, derived from the ancient word chamori, means noble. Around 4,500 years ago, their journey began. Setting out from the islands of Southeast Asia, what we now know as Indonesia and the Philippines, these intrepid voyagers sailed into the unknown, carrying with them their language, their culture, and a profound understanding of the sea. They settled these islands, creating a new world, a new civilization that would remain untouched by outsiders for over 3,000 years. This epic migration was made possible by a vessel of revolutionary design, a technological marvel that left early European explorers in awe. They called it the flying proa. The ancient Chamorros had several names for their canoes, depending on their size. The largest, the ocean-going vessels, were known as sakman. Smaller canoes were called lelek, dudings, or duduli. The genius of the proa lay in its unique asymmetrical hull. The side facing the outrigger was rounded, while the opposite side was nearly flat. This ingenious design counteracted the drag from the outrigger and prevented the canoe from being pushed sideways by the wind, allowing it to sail remarkably close to the wind at great speeds. Unlike other sailing vessels, the proa did not turn around to change direction. Instead, the crew would perform a maneuver known as shunting, moving the sail from one end of the canoe to the other. In an instant, the bow would become the stern, and the stern the bow, allowing the vessel to reverse course with unmatched agility. These were not just boats. They were the lifeblood of a maritime culture. They enabled the Chamorro to become master fishermen, traders, and navigators, connecting the islands of the archipelago into a single, cohesive society. The loss of this seafaring knowledge under colonial rule would become a profound cultural wound, and its modern revival a powerful symbol of resilience and rebirth. The society that built these magnificent canoes was as sophisticated as their technology. It was a world held in a delicate balance, organized around the foundational principle of kinship, the familia or clan. This was a matrilineal society, a system where identity, social status, and most importantly, control over land and resources were passed down through the mother's line. At the head of each clan stood the magalahi, the oldest and most respected male, and the magahaga, the oldest female. They were not husband and wife, but often brother and sister, and they served as co-equal guardians and administrators of the clan's welfare and resources. This unique system of shared power demonstrates that ancient Chamorro society was not a simple patriarchy or matriarchy, but a complex structure of checks and balances. This society was also highly stratified, divided into two rigid social castes into which a person was born and could not leave. The upper caste was known as the Chamori. They were the nobles, warriors, craftsmen, and leaders who lived in villages along the coast, with easy access to the sea. The Chamorro themselves were divided into the highest-ranking nobles, the Matao, and a middle class known as the Achaot. The lower caste was the Mananchang. They lived further inland, in the hills and jungles, serving as farmers and laborers for the Chamorro. While they could not own land, they were not slaves, and they cultivated the land for their own sustenance and that of the ruling caste. The most visible expression of this social hierarchy was the latte stone. These monumental structures, some rising over 3 meters in height, served as the foundations for the homes of the Matao elite, or for important communal buildings like the great canoe houses where the village's most precious vessels were stored. They were a physical manifestation of power, prestige, and the social order. The pre-contact Chamorro world was an intricate web of interconnected systems. The technological brilliance of the proa, the architectural ambition of the latte, and the social stability of the caste system were all underwritten by a unique matrilineal kinship structure that empowered women and ensured the continuation of the clan. This sophisticated balance was the true foundation of their ancient culture, a foundation that would be deliberately and systematically shattered by the arrival of a new world. For thousands of years, the Chamorro people were the masters of their own destiny. But in 1521, that isolation was broken forever. After a grueling journey across the Pacific, the expedition of Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, sailing for Spain, stumbled upon the Marianas Islands. The first encounter was a tragic clash of cultures. The Chamorro, operating within their own societal norms, took items from Magellan's ships as payment for the provisions they offered. Magellan and his crew, however, saw this not as trade, but as theft. In retaliation, they burned a village, killed several men, and reclaimed what they believed was stolen. Magellan christened the islands Islas de los Ladrones, the Islands of Thieves, a derogatory name that would persist for over a century, setting a dark precedent for the relationship to come. While other ships would pass through the Marianas for the next 150 years, the full force of colonization arrived in 1668 with the Jesuit priest Diego Luis de San Vitores. His mission had a dual purpose: to convert the Chamorro people to Catholicism and to claim the islands for the Spanish Empire. Initially, some leaders, like the Magalahi Quipuha of Hagatna, welcomed the missionaries, perhaps seeing an opportunity for political or material gain. San Vitores established the first Catholic mission, built a church, and opened a school for boys, the Colegio de San Juan de Letran, using small gifts to entice students. The islands were officially renamed the Marianas Islands, in honor of the Spanish Queen Regent, Maria Ana de Austria. But the fragile peace quickly dissolved. The Jesuits' insistence on baptizing infants, often against the will of their parents, was seen as a profound violation of cultural and spiritual norms. As the missionaries sought to dismantle the ancient Chamorro way of life, resistance grew, and the era of the cross became the era of the sword. What followed was a brutal 30-year conflict known as the Spanish Chamorro Wars. Chamorro leaders rose to defend their homeland. Men like Magalahi Jurao of Hagatna rallied their people, besieging the Spanish Presidio in 1670. In 1672, after San Vitores baptized his infant daughter against his wishes, Magalahi Matang of Timon killed the priest, sparking a wave of violent Spanish reprisals. The Spanish responded with overwhelming force and a systematic policy of subjugation known as reducción. Their goal was to break the back of the resistance and erase the foundations of Chamorro society. Soldiers conducted devastating scorched earth campaigns, burning villages, destroying crops, and shattering the sacred latte stones. to sever the people's connection to their ancestral lands and the sea. The Spanish forcibly relocated the entire population of the northern islands to Guam, concentrating them in a few Christianized villages centered around a church. This resulted in a demographic collapse of horrific proportions, a near genocide. The population, estimated to be between 50,000 and 100,000 at the time of the mission's arrival, plummeted. A child who was 10 years old in 1668 would have witnessed a 93% drop in the population of his people by the time he reached old age.
This great dying was not caused by war alone. European diseases, to which the Chamorro had no immunity, swept through the islands, killing thousands. But the decline continued long after the fighting stopped. The trauma of forced relocation, the loss of culture, and the shattering of their world led to a deep societal despair. Historical accounts report widespread suicide, infanticide, and abortion as people chose not to bring children into a world of subjugation. By the early 19th century, the Chamorro people, once tens of thousands strong, had been reduced to barely 1,000 souls. This was more than just a military conquest. It was a holistic assault on a civilization. The Spanish systematically deconstructed the three pillars of ancient Chamorro society. The matrilineal system was attacked, the vital connection to the sea was severed, and their spiritual beliefs were suppressed. This societal death, this sociocide, created a state of profound cultural trauma that mirrored the physical annihilation of the people. From the ashes of this devastation, the survivors forged a new identity. Over the next 2 centuries, Chamorro culture underwent a profound transformation, blending ancient traditions with the customs of their colonizers to create a unique, syncretic way of life. The Spanish imposed deep and lasting changes. The matrilineal system was officially dismantled. Through church doctrine and legal decree, the father was declared the head of the household. An American naval order in 1919 would later outlaw the ancient practice of children taking their mother's surname, forcing them to abide by patriarchal naming conventions. Western-style clothing, which prioritized covering the body, replaced traditional attire. Roman Catholicism became the bedrock of community life, and today the vast majority of Chamorro people remain devoutly Catholic. Yet even within the church, ancient beliefs survived. A strong reverence for ancestors and a belief in the spirits of the land, the Thaldaumona, became interwoven with Catholic practice, creating a distinct form of folk Catholicism that endures to this day. The language, the very soul of the culture, also adapted. While the grammatical structure remained indigenous, the Chamorro language absorbed thousands of Spanish words, a testament to 3 centuries of colonial rule. The diet was transformed by the introduction of new crops from the Americas like corn, tomatoes, and pineapples, and new animals, which became staples of the local cuisine. This fusion of cultures created the vibrant modern Chamorro identity, a people of Malayo-Indonesian descent with a considerable admixture of Spanish, Filipino, and Mexican ancestry, resilient and forever changed by their encounter with the West. For over 200 years, the Marianas languished as a remote outpost of the Spanish Empire. But by the end of the 19th century, a new power was rising in the Pacific, the United States. In 1898, the Spanish-American War erupted, a conflict fought thousands of miles away in the Caribbean, yet one that would irrevocably change the fate of the Chamorro people. The American capture of Guam was a surreal, almost farcical affair. On June 20, 1898, the cruiser USS Charleston arrived at Guam. Its captain, Henry Glass, had orders to seize the island. Unaware that Spain and the United States had been at war for 2 months, the Spanish governor, Juan Marina, mistook the American ship's warning shots for a salute and sent an officer to apologize for being unable to return the gesture as he was out of gunpowder. The transfer of power was bloodless. With the signing of the Treaty of Paris later that year, Spain ceded Guam to the United States. The remaining Northern Mariana Islands were sold to Germany the following year. For the first time in their history, the Chamorro people were politically fractured, their destiny once again decided in a foreign capital, without their voice or consent. For the United States, Guam was not a population to be liberated, but a strategic asset, a vital coaling station for naval ships on the long journey between Hawaii and the newly acquired Philippines. For the next 50 years, with the exception of the war, Guam was ruled by the U.S. Navy. By executive order, the entire island was designated a naval station. The naval governor was an absolute ruler, the head of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government, a military dictator who answered only to the Secretary of the Navy. The Navy brought modern infrastructure, public health programs, and an American education system. But this progress came at a cost. The Chamorro people were not granted U.S. citizenship or the constitutional protections that came with it. They were legally considered wards of the U.S. government, with no say in their own governance. The Navy's primary goal was Americanization. The most damaging tool in this effort was the systematic suppression of the indigenous language. In 1922, the naval government officially banned the speaking of the Chamorro language in schools, government offices, and public workplaces. Children were punished, sometimes physically, for speaking their mother tongue. In a zealous effort to enforce English, Chamorro dictionaries were even confiscated and destroyed. This policy was a profound cultural assault, inflicting a wound that silenced generations and from which the language is still struggling to recover.